One of my earlier demos, I showed how an event mesh works and how you can use it for horizontal scaling. This is sort of an extension to that demo where I would like to show you what happens if one of the nodes in your event mesh goes down. How do like queues really store those data, those events for you, those messages for you, and how you can have your applications recover and consume those events later on. So really the whole store and forward mechanism of queues in an event mesh. Okay, so same thing I have here as earlier, where I have a broker running on an EC2 instance in AWS, such a standard edition. And then I have another one using Solace Cloud. So as you can see, this is a cloud service. It's a dev instance running on Solace Cloud, quite similar. All right, so I have them clustered together to form an event mesh. So if we go to clustering, you can see that my primary broker here, which is this one, has been connected or linked to my Solace Cloud instance, which is running on AWS as part of Solace Cloud. And if we go to clustering here, we'll see the same thing. My Solace Cloud instance has been linked with my primary instance running on EC2 by myself. Okay, great. So over here, we have Q1, which is subscribing to equity US and greater than. All right, and then on Solace Cloud instance, we will create a Q2, leave the defaults, and then for subscriptions we'll add, let's add equities only. And okay, great. So then I'm going to be using SDK Perf utility. I've covered this before. It's a great utility for spinning up producers and consumers very easily, and controlling what kind of message rate you want. So for this demo, I will be using a Java-based SDK Perf client, and it's going to be publishing to a topic, equity US NYSE Apple, and these are going to be persistent messages, and they're going to be publishing a bunch of messages at the message rate of 10, and each payload will be of 100 bytes. Okay, so it's connecting directly to my AWS instance that I deployed myself. Great. If I do that, all right, it has started publishing. Perfect. And then on the consumption side, on the consumer side, I'm going to connect to the same instance where I have Q1 and start consuming data from there. So if we see here, we're getting messages already because my queue is subscribing to that topic. And similarly on the other node, I am getting messages as well because it's also subscribing to the same topic hierarchy. Okay, so let's start consuming these messages. And for that, I will have this command where I'm specifying that I want to bind to my Q1. These are the connection details, and give me whatever data that queue has. So if I start running it, I get the messages. Great. Now I want to do the same thing for my Q2, which is on over here. So let me just copy the connection details. Okay, and this is my okay. So should be this same command, just different host name. Okay, perfect. So now we can see that we're binding to Q2 and we've started consuming this data. Great. So this is expected. What's happening is that we're publishing messages to our EC2 instance. We have a Q1 over there subscribing to those messages, and we have a consumer binding to that queue, and we're getting that message, right? Similarly, we have Q2, and because this instance running in Solace Cloud is linked to our instance running by itself in EC2, we are able to get access to that data as well. Those are attracted and queued into Q2 because they match the topic subscription. And we have a consumer which is also binding to Q2 and consuming that data. Great. So now the question is, what happens if we get something happens to our cluster? So if we go here, what happens if this link goes down? So let's check. So we're on the Solace Cloud instance. We're going to turn off this link. If I change the status from enabled to disabled, let's see what happens. Okay, apply. Sure. So we'll see that our publisher is still working because the publisher is connecting to the Solace, to the EC2 instance, which is fine. Our first consumer is working fine because that's connecting to our EC2 instance as well. Great. So these two are connecting to the same instance. However, this instance of consumer is down now because it's not able to get any messages because we turned down the link. Right. So if we look over here, we're getting those messages, but we have messages piling up which were supposed to go to the second node running on Solace Cloud. So we have those messages piling up over here, but they're not coming to this queue yet, right? So what's happening? Okay, so if we go back, you can see that the messages are piling up in the queue, okay? And if we turn this link back up, so we change the status, okay, apply. We'll see that our consumer 2, which was binding to Q2, has started getting those messages. So if we go to our queue, we'll see everything is working fine. And if we go to our EC2 instance where the messages were piling up, if we look at that, we'll see that we have drained those messages. So those messages were eventually delivered to our Solace Cloud instance once that link was back up, right? Okay, great. So we know that that link works and we're not losing any data. Now what happens if one of these consumers goes down? So let's say this consumer 2, so instead of the actual link going down, the consumer itself, your application goes down. What happens? Okay, so I've killed this consumer and we'll see those messages building up on this Q2, right? So if we go back to the instance over here, there are no messages building up here because these messages are being delivered to the queue on the remote instance, on Solace Cloud instance. It's just that this time we don't actually have a consumer consuming these messages from Q2, right? So the link is still up. We're still delivering the messages over to our Solace Cloud instance, but there's no one actually consuming those messages. So they're building up in this queue. So great. If we just restart our application, we'll see that those messages are not lost and we are able to consume them. So our application has now come up, recovered from whatever had happened earlier, and had started consuming those messages. Great. So that was it. So this demo shows you how an event mesh works, and if a link goes down, the messages will pile up. They're not lost. And once the application comes back up, it will consume those messages. Additionally, what happens if an application is down? The messages are built up in the queue in the remote instance. Again, they're not lost. Once the application comes back up, those messages are then delivered. This is a classic store and forward scenario where if your application is down, the queue will store those messages and will then later forward those messages when applicable. All right, thank you.